Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Sean.
Well, here we are. We are back for another episode of the Evergreen Show. We're getting up there now. A lot of episodes. The podcast is picking up steam. Sean, are you there?
I am here.
All right, tell me, what's the weather? Give me the news. What's the scoop?
It's a gorgeous day. It's freezing because I live in the Great White North, but otherwise things are going great, and I can't wait to talk about our fun topic today.
Well, I love today's topic, and primarily I love this topic because it's something we're hearing about everywhere. There's a lot of people talking about this idea of 10xing things, right? We got to 10x our efforts, 10x our results, 10x everything. If you want to get these great results, you need to 10x yourself. You need to be going hard. I'm hearing this from guys like Grant Cardone in the sales arena, right? We need to 10x, 10x, 10x. I think that's his thing, is he wrote 10x. But then you've got these other guys that are, they seem to be constantly producing content nonstop. They're videoing themselves 24/7 a day. There's this idea that we just need to be 10xing things. And Sean, we think there's a way to get 10x results without the burnout, because that's what happens. People 10x for a very short time. They put that sort of hardcore effort in, and then they just burn out and everything falls to the wayside. So Sean, what do you think? Can we do this without the burnout?
I think we can. More importantly, I think we have to. I think this idea of working harder, pushing harder, driving yourself more and more, it's absolutely destructive. And what's more, it's not new. I was reading a fascinating article not long ago about the origin of the 40-hour work week. And according to the article, it came from Henry Ford. And he ran some experiments. And what he found was that when he moved from a 10-hour day to an 8-hour day and a 6-day week to a 5-day week, what actually ended up happening was that productivity went up. Less time, less effort, higher productivity. And it makes sense. When we're tired, we don't do our best work. When we're overworked, we don't do our best work. So the content we're churning out on hour 80 of our week of 10xing is going to objectively suck.
So it reminds me of a company I was working with not too long ago, and the president of the company was trying to figure out why he had these huge differences in productivity per each employee. And so what was the difference here? Why were some doing so much better than the others? So we introduced some, sort of transparent metrics that actually tracked activity to show what people were doing. And what we found really quickly was that, yes, some were doing a lot less than the others. Now, when we introduced the analytics, what do you think happened, Sean?
Well, luckily, I've got a little bit of a peek behind the curtain here. So I think what happened is that there wasn't a huge correlation between total amount of activity and productivity, but I think that the ones who were getting the best results had a few things in common.
Which were what?
Which were that they were focusing on providing value in multiple areas, in the areas that they were best suited to give, rather than just working hard at whatever crossed their plate.
Right. So one of the things that we said to this president of this company was that it's not about winning by this sort of huge gap. If you look at any sort of traditional, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's a horse race, the winner always wins by just a nose, right? Sometimes in the Olympics, the difference between gold and silver and bronze is what, like a split quarter of a second or something. You need to know what to do and in what order. So it's not even about working 10x times smarter in many cases. It's just about knowing exactly what to do and what works. You shared with me the fantastic example of the Rubiks Cube. Can you tell me how that applies here?
Absolutely. Years ago, I watched a small child solve a Rubik's Cube, something that I'd never been able to do. I remember as a kid peeling the stickers off and I got bored doing that, let alone actually solving the damn thing. I started reading up on it, and there were something to the effect of 40 trillion possible states that it could be in. There were millions of billions of possible states, but there's only one that's solved. And that's always made me think a lot about this world of business we love to play in. There's so many ways that things can go, but there's a very few ways that they're going profitably. Now, what's fascinating about the Rubik's Cube is that it's actually really easy to solve. You can teach a child how to solve it in about 2 hours. With practice, they can do it in under 5 minutes with about 6 hours of practice. There's a process to follow, and that warms my heart because I love processes. So, with the Rubik's Cube, with sales, with business, if you know the right process, you can cut through the millions of billions of potential scenarios and get to the ones that work.
So, this brings me to the most fascinating point of all of this. So when companies think that we start to track things like activity, which we often talk about, this is important. The trick isn't to identify necessarily who's working 10 times harder. We start to look at that, but then what we want to look for is the distinctions in the process. And what we find is that there's always a distinction in the process. So for example, in sales organizations or on sales teams, it's usually not the ones that are working, 15-hour days or making 15 times as many calls. They have a process that, for example, they're the ones who follow up with clients after the first sale and maintain a relationship. They're the ones who continuously ask for referrals. They're the ones who do this, that, and the other, and they have a process. And then so we look at these clients and we ask them one of our favorite questions. Please explain to me your clearly defined sales process. And they look at us with, jumbled eyes as to what the heck are we talking about? But this is the key. It's figuring out the process and then asking ourselves, how can we disseminate this to everybody so everybody can come up to that same level? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%. One thing I'd just like to add in there is that what we often find is that there are certain areas or certain parts of the process that are distasteful to people on the team, and they're going to be different areas. So, if we imagine a sales team with 3 people in it, Bill, Jane, and Jim, Bill might hate asking for referrals, and he might only do it once a year when he absolutely has to. Jane might hate making cold calls, and Jim might hate doing contract follow-up. And so what's going to happen here is, left to their own devices, they will not do those areas, or they will do those areas so poorly that it hurts the whole process. If you have a 4th salesperson, he may be less talented than each of them in any given area. But if he's doing all of the pieces of the process, then he's going to be much more successful, because everything that needs to be done is getting done, and there are no weak links in that process chain that are breaking it apart and keeping you from getting the sale.
Right. So I think to me that, again, is just such a powerful concept. So it's, this whole idea of 10xing everything you do is often the entirely wrong approach, because there's a far better way to do things. And it's so much more simple to just really understand what are the most important things that we do that make the most significant impact. And then asking yourself, how do we make sure that these things are being done on a regular and continuous basis consistently? And so they're not falling between the cracks. They're just constantly getting done. It's not about more. It's about doing the right things right and doing them consistently. So Sean, is there anything else you want to add to this, or should we get into the challenge right away?
I think we can get into the challenge right away.
Wow, this is a tight one. Okay, so here we go. The challenge for this week is pretty simple. Take a look at the most important areas of your business and try to identify what's making the most significant impact. So we talked about sales teams, as we often do, but look and consider what are the top 1 to 3 things that impact your sales efforts, or your revenue generation, or your client experience, or your customer retention efforts. Try and come up with 1 to 3 things in each of those areas that have the biggest impact. And then ask yourself if you're truly spending your time in those areas, or are you trying to do everything sort of haphazardly? And so one of my favorite lines from my mentor is, try to move 1 or 2 things forward a mile, not a million things forward an inch. And that's the key here. You see, everybody that's 10xing things is moving a whole bunch of things forward an inch, but nothing's getting driven forward a mile. And that's what we want to do here today. Anything else to add from my good friend, Mr. Veltman?
Well, I'll give a slightly different challenge, the advanced management challenge here. And this is going to have a lot of components. So, feel free to rewind this and write it down. Challenge 1 is, do you know what's being done? So have you listened to us enough to finally put the activity tracking into place and know who's doing what? Number 2, given that that's happening, do you have your defined processes in place so that you can map the first against this? Can you see who's doing what and who should be doing what? Finally, in the third piece, take a look and see if you can see from the activity that's being done which parts of the process each person in your organization hates doing, because those are the pieces that they need to be doing more and need to be doing consistently in order to get these results.
I like that a lot. So as Sean said, you might need to just back it up a bit, listen to that, listen to those 2 key components. I think what Sean asked there is a very valid question too, is if you've been listening to our podcast for a while and the things we talk about, he asked you there, do you already have a few of these things in place that we continuously and regularly talk about? If you don't, you should definitely reach out to us. That's the shameless plug of the day. But either way, take part in these challenges, because they will offer value to you. They will create an impact. And this one in particular will do some great stuff for your organization. So Sean, any last words before I close this out here?
No, I think that covers it. So close it out, and I look forward to doing it again next week.
Well, here's how we're closing it out. You're probably going to hear this just around the time that the new book that Sean and I co-wrote together is coming out. It's called Dealing with Difficult Customers. You can buy this anywhere where books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, 800 CEO Read, wherever you like. If you enjoyed the podcast, please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues and peers and coworkers. Be sure to sign up for the Tuesday tidbits off my website at noahfleming.com. And if you ever want to get in touch with us to talk about how we can help in your efforts, definitely reach out off my website again at noahfleming.com. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.